From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? And thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris with you on a Monday. A good show on tap as always. We're going to open up the phone lines, invite you to join in the conversation. We're going to have a multifaceted program this morning. Our first guest I'll introduce you just in the morning. In a moment, we're going to talk about I guess churches and religious services and where things stand right now with the pandemic. And maybe, I don't know, and you can weigh in as well if you'd like to call and join in the conversation. How are things being done at your church? Are you having in-person sermons, or is it still virtual? How are things being done with weddings and the like, memorials, funerals, all of that, and what you think is safe and what you think is not? And we're going to talk this morning about that for the first part of the show. And then we'll be joined later in the program by Metro Vice Mayor Jim Schulman, who's going to talk a little bit about, as always, what's happening here in the city. And with regard to, I've got some questions about how the city might take a more proactive step, perhaps, if needed, in enforcing some of the mandates on masks and gatherings. Because, again, this past weekend, just seems to me some people don't get it. And I see crowds downtown, and I see parties being thrown with hundreds of people, not social distancing. They don't get it. And so what's it going to take for us all to do what's right to protect us? And that's the first part of our show, and I think something that Bishop Joseph Walkder has some strong opinions on. He's joining us now, of course, with Mount Zion Church, one of the very largest churches with 3 campuses here in the Middle Tennessee area. Good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Nick.
Tell me, I guess your congregation has been worshiping virtually, has it since March?
Yes, since March. Yes, since middle March, since the pandemic really spiked, and we made a decision to go completely virtual. I'm glad we did because we discovered shortly thereafter 4 members of our congregation who were very faithful, who actually contracted coronavirus on their job, and they contracted it and traced it back to the day they actually might have contracted it on a Monday. And had they come to church the following Sunday, wow, we would have had an outbreak. Yeah, so it was really that week. So.
Makes a big difference. And we should say then, these months later now, you're still with it. And I think maybe when you initially did this, you may have been one of the first. Other congregations initially followed suit early on and have since come back and started holding in-person services, and some of which with social separating. And frankly, I've seen evidence of several churches where they're going back to the way it was before COVID. You are still standing by what you started in March, and you're still doing it today. What's the difference? Why are you sticking to it when you perhaps see other congregations choosing to go back?
Well, first of all, I think it's important for us to be good partners with, our city and our state, and it's important, and even for the nation. I think it's important for us to recognize the faith community, how we should take the lead in this partnership of helping to keep people safe. I think we have to recognize that coronavirus has not gone anywhere, and just because we choose to go outside and to lessen our restrictions and do the things that we think are normal, it doesn't mean that the coronavirus is going to give us a pass. I think second, we made the decision because we recognize the impact of coronavirus on African American community. Our congregation is about 85% African American, and so it adversely affects our community in ways in which it may not affect other communities. So we're often thinking about, all those folks who are at risk and how that could spike, and health disparities, et cetera, contributing to that. So we just felt it was the responsible thing to do on our part.
Have you, I'm just curious, had any pushback at all from perhaps some of your, members of your church who said, we would love to come, we want to be there, it's an important part of our lives to be there and gather with others. Can't we have services, sir?
Absolutely not. I think people really get it. They understand it, particularly when they look at the numbers. It's in our face every single day. We see the deaths of people who have been affected by this directly and indirectly. And of course, when you've seen families and, deal with folks who are in hospitals on ventilators, people are really appreciative of the stance we've taken. And I think that they really understand how the virtual space works. And we've had an uptick even in that in terms of viewership, attendance, and all of that. So people have kind of settled in this, and they're kind of for the long haul, waiting to see until a vaccination actually happens.
Yeah, and you've proven, as many churches have, that you can certainly worship, virtually, which is great. I've heard some of these churches, some of the pastors, not just in Tennessee but elsewhere, that have chosen to have in-person services, saying along the lines that, well, we're going to do this and the Lord will protect us. What do you say to that?
Well, I think, that's obviously a theological slippery slope. Obviously the Lord will protect us, but the Bible says that, God has not given us a spirit of fear, correct, but power, love, and a sound mind. And God has given us wisdom, right? And part of being protected, my point would be is when you think about the plague in Egypt, when God told the children of Israel that the death angel was going to pass over and put blood on their doorposts, they were supposed to stay at home. The protection was obeying God or being at home. And so I think it's important for us not to tempt God or not to throw out this language that can confuse people theologically, but understand that there's a sense of wisdom in this, and God operates in that.
And I know you're a man of strong faith and religious beliefs, but at the same time, I sometimes see people questioning what we're hearing from scientists and science. And I'm wondering how you view that, and that you're able to still be a man of faith, but listen to the scientists and the doctors.
Yeah. No, I think it's important. I think it's incredibly important for faith communities to be in partnership with science. I think we have to. I think that we have this very convenient, theology that wants to dispel science when it's convenient for our own purposes. But I do think that science and faith, they do work side by side. And in this instance, in particular, you're dealing with the virus. You're dealing with something that has, come through our community and and has affected us in ways in which the history books will have to record. I appreciate the work of Dr. Hildreth at Meharry Medical College, and of course, he's on the forefront in this area as well, helping churches and helping communities be safe in this. And so I think it's important for us to, not discount science. These folks love God too, and they're the very smart people who can really help us, do this pandemic and get to the other side.
Yeah, and you're right. Dr. Hildreth is one of the strongest voices on social distancing, wearing masks, and the seriousness of the situation. And by the way, we should say, doing things virtually doesn't mean everything stops. You were telling me just before we went on air, maybe you can, share it now, is that, you're having virtual weddings, right? Are you preparing for one now?
Yeah, absolutely. Preparing for a virtual wedding. And I think what we have to do is, the church really has to reimagine itself in this pandemic. I think because the building is closed, the idea is that the church is closed, but it is not. Much of what we do happens outside the building, and the ministry continues to go on. And so we're still doing everything that we've always done. We're just doing it in a virtual space. So virtual, we're having virtual get-togethers with couples. We're having virtual weddings. We're having, virtual singles nights out, virtual vacation Bible school we just did with our young people last night. We hosted a citywide, we hosted for our congregation. We had Dr. Battle on talking about school and engagement, which was important, to talk about that and helping our parents prepare for school. So we're doing all this in a virtual space, and you're getting more attendance, more people involved. And so you have to reimagine that and use it.
Yeah, and if you would, and I've observed some of these and actually participated some. So much is on Zoom now and everything else, like what we're doing here. The importance, I know church, so much a part of that, and people's religion and their faith is the fellowship. And you can't help but lose a little of that when you're not sitting there sharing fellowship with someone right next to you. But it sounds to me like you've been able to find a way to kind of at least bridge that. It's not the same, but are you finding that people can still reach out to one another?
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, I've said to my congregation, and I've said to other leaders around the country, right? I've said, listen, yes, we're having to take a little hit in terms of, the fellowship component, in terms of people loving to hug and being, in those circles. But listen, there can be no ship if there are no fellows in it, right? And so, we have to make sure we keep the fellows safe and healthy so that we can actually have the ship, people in the ship when this is over. And, we don't want to lose people that once this is over, we have no one to really fellowship with. And so to that point, we're doing a lot of cool things, virtual connects, a lot of cool things we're doing in this virtual space, and we're teaching other churches as well and helping them. And so we're sharing our resources, and it's been very, very positive.
I think that's great. Listen, just last question for you here. As you sit and watch what's happening, what is it going to take, and when and how? What will you be looking for when you decide, all right, now it's time, no more virtual, we can bring people back? What's that going to take for you to reach that decision?
Well, what we've done, we've put together, a strategic task force, and there'll be meetings. It's June, and we're going to kind of share our findings in the end of August, end of this month with our congregation, kind of a manual, a path forward. We're looking at all areas, and it's going to take, a very serious, deep dive into what are the best practices, what are convention centers doing to re-engage, what are the logistical things around sanitation and all those things. And so, I believe it's just going to take a concerted effort. It's going to take, wisdom. It's going to take truly making certain that this vaccination has efficacy on it, and that we can get on the other side of this, and people are safe. When you're moving the volumes of people that we're moving, there's a responsibility in that, and we just want to make sure when people come that they are absolutely safe.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I mean, it may not be until we have a really good treatment or a good vaccination. The one thing I sense from you, unlike some of the others, is that things start getting better and then everyone jumps right back in and you backslide. You're not going to let that happen.
Never. No. We got to stay the course. We have to stay the course. We continue to set ourselves back because we just get anxious and we want to go back to normal. I think the thing that I like to say to people is you have to dispel this myth that things are going to go back to normal. Nothing will ever be normal again. I think it's important for us to think about, what it looks like post-quarantine, post-pandemic, and start preparing ourselves for that.
I'll tell you what, Bishop Walkder, thank you for coming on. You're a voice of reason and hope there, and I think what you're doing with your congregation is the right thing and terrific, and I wish you well, and I wish others would take a look and take a page from that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure, sir. We'll talk to you again soon if that's all right. We'll keep in touch with you.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much. That's Bishop Joseph Walkder of Mount Zion. And I mean that. I mean, there are other churches that may be doing in-person services. And if you can do it in such a way that's safe and separate and the masks, more power to you. If you're doing it with a packed crowd, and I think you heard what him saying, I just view that as flat out irresponsible. Okay, in this day and age. If you can address it in a way safely, and I think it can sometimes, depending on the size of your church, maybe be that way. But I hear what he's saying there, and I don't see how anyone cannot hear what he just said and not think that that's just rational. And this is a man of God who also, though, is listening to scientists and trying to take what's best for his congregation of 30,000 plus. How can you argue with that? Anyway, it's nice of him to join us. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll open up the phone lines as well. Metro Vice Mayor Jim Shulman will be joining us. We'll be taking your phone calls on that front, on what's happening here in the city with regard to masks and others and his observations. It's been a couple weeks since we've seen him, so we'll be back with that right after this.